It's just me, Sean, and I'm here letting you know y'all should tune into the streams. I've been here on Twitch. We be having a good time. Tune in. My boy Kiro Talks, underrated YouTube channel. Yo, this is the most underrated YouTube channel right here, Kiro Talks. He made a video on what was gaming like in 2004. I was born in 03. Hopefully it is the correct. Wait on my screen.
Years ago. Most of us were probably kids at that time, so it might be hard to remember exactly what gaming was like back then. So let's take a trip down memory lane and look at what was honestly a really crazy year for gaming. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the hot game releases in 2004, let's start with the console stuff. This was the year that Nintendo launched Game Boy Advance Video, which was a line of Game Boy Advance cartridges with episodes of TV shows and even
I had that SpongeBob one, that middle one.
Terrible, obviously, because they're super compressed.
I loved it.
At the time, it was big Nintendo.
Of course it wouldn't. That's how games is now.
This year was the release of the Nintendo DS. Nintendo's newest handheld
2004
console,
was it?
Was first unveiled in a prototype form.
Nintendo best console. Second best. The 3DS is. Just a better DS. Same concept, same family.
This was quite strange considering only 3 years prior, Nintendo released the Game Boy Advance, which was supposed to be their next generation handheld console. Even stranger is that only 1 year prior, in 2003, they released their new and improved Game Boy.
You think that's what Nintendo's about to do? You think that? They said 3 years after they made
the Game Boy Advance SP, which had a new clamshell design which could protect your screen, a rechargeable battery that removed the need to buy multiple batteries, and a front-lit screen allowing you to see the game easier. Another weird thing about the DS is that Nintendo initially marketed it not as a replacement for the Game Boy Advance, but instead as a third console in their line of systems along with the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube. Some people believe that Nintendo did this because they weren't entirely sure if the DS would be a success. The DS was an odd console. It has 2 screens instead of one, with the bottom one being a touchscreen, and it also had a built-in microphone for some reason. But the DS did have some legitimately great features at the time, like built-in wireless connectivity to connect with other
Actually, speaking of DS, look, it's my auntie though. A DS. I hope it still works.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Nintendo wasn't the only company to release a new portable console this year. This year was also the release of Sony's handheld, the PlayStation Portable. And like Nintendo, Sony showed off this console at E3 2004. Sony had already successfully ripped the home console market from Nintendo's clutches, so I guess they figured they could do the same thing with the handheld market. And to be fair, the PSP had some great benefits, like a wide screen for better viewing, some pretty powerful components for a handheld console at the time, allowing for
the PSP is also a goated console,
and the ability to download games off of the internet using Sony's new PlayStation Network, although that feature came a few years later. But not only was the PSP a great gaming console, it was also a great multimedia device. This thing had the ability to play music, watch videos, and even browse the internet.
This right here! Oh! The time, where did it go? That PSP right there is revolutionary. Not going to lie. What up? Do I dare to say Nintendo's and Sony's best consoles and handhelds? Cause damn, nah, it's not. Cause some of the games, maybe not Sony, Nintendo.
PSP did have its fair share of quirks, like the weird nub analog stick, the odd decision to use optical discs for games instead of cartridges, and of course, Sony decided to use their own proprietary storage device for saving data, the memory stick. All in all though, the PSP was a massive success for Sony. This console had a ton of RPGs and entries from popular franchises on previous PlayStation.
You can play Assassin's Creed on
the PSP ended up selling over 75 million
I bet if I play that now,
that
shit would be annoying. But back then,
to talk about Nintendo and Sony while leaving Microsoft out. Microsoft didn't release a handheld this year or any new consoles at all, but what they did do was start their Xbox Live Arcade service. By going to Xbox.com and ordering a copy of the free
This going
Xbox
on in
Live
general.
Arcade disc, you could have access to the service. Xbox Live Arcade allowed
Dang,
Xbox
all
owners
this
to
happened?
download simpler games to their Xbox like
This
Miss
is all
Pac-Man,
Evolution.
Joust,
Like,
and Smash TV. The service would really become a big part of gaming on Microsoft's next console, the Xbox 360. But even on the original Xbox, Xbox Live Arcade was a pretty cute little service for old arcade games.
Xbox really sold their console dreams with just their naming. What it like? The original Xbox is just called original Xbox. Then you got Xbox 360. Then the Xbox One. Then the Xbox Series X and Series S. Bro, this is not a computer. Just name it simple. You can name it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or you can do the 360, 720. Or just do Super Xbox, anything.
And other smaller titles. Let's start with new entries in old franchises. Game Freak gave us Pokemon Emerald, the third game in the new Generation 3 games that started 2 years prior with Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Emerald is easily the best version of Gen 3, offering redesigns for the male and female protagonists, a reworked story that incorporates elements of the stories of both Ruby and Sapphire, a brand new post-game location with tons of new challenges, and plenty of other new features. Speaking of RPGs, the Paper Mario series got its second game this year, Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. This game is a grail amongst Mario fans, GameCube fans, and RPG fans alike. It says a lot that its remake is one of the most hotly anticipated games I've seen in a while.
Oh yeah.
Mario has never
that came out in 04? Whoa.
But the Thousand-Year Door's narrative
that came out of
that,
yo,
yeah,
you telling me they did this shit was crazy. This genre was crazy. The DS came out
with memorable characters in a Mario
This game came
While this
out.
series began on a
The
Sony
PSP
platform,
came
another
out.
sequel that came out on a Nintendo platform this year was Kingdom Hearts: Chain of Memories on the Game Boy Advance.
Xbox Live
Kingdom Hearts
came
for
out.
many years was infamous for all of its games being important to the overarching narrative and all of those games being released on a bunch of different consoles. And that trend began here with Chain of Memories. Kingdom Hearts has experimented with a ton of different mechanics over the years, but I still think Chain of Memories might be the most unique game in the series. It combines
kinda
the series'
hard.
trademark action RPG combat.
I would have liked this
with
as a
deck
kid. I would have
builder.
loved this
All
as a
attacks in
kid.
this game are
I
done via
would have
cards.
definitely been.
Each card has a number,
Definitely
and if
would
you
have been
use
my
a card
Kingdom
that has
Hearts.
a higher value than your enemy's card, you can cancel out
definitely
their
be in
attack.
this one.
I'd be here
I'd never
for
be in a
a
Kingdom Hearts
while
game.
if I went into all of the complexities of this game's battle system, but it's
But this is
honestly
hard.
really cool, and it's a shame that the game is frequently overlooked, even by some Kingdom Hearts fans. RPG fans were eating good this year with several new entries in old series, but first-person shooter fans were not starving for sequels this year either. 2004 saw the release of Halo 2, which launched with online play, allowing you to play against other people over the internet. Doom 3, which brought back arguably the most influential first-person shooter franchise in history back into the mainstream. And of course, Half-Life 2. There's another first-person shooter Valve game that came out this year that's rather notable, Counter-Strike Condition Zero. This game was the first game to have its initial launch on Valve's Steam service. Steam would end up becoming a juggernaut in the online game
I was just saying something about Steam
with
today.
thousands of games released for
That's
it
wild.
every single year. Some of the other new titles in old franchises were GTA San Andreas, which is a masterclass in open world games.
San Andreas
Also
came
Metal
out
Gear
too.
Solid 3 Snake Eater, which is still considered by many fans
this
to be
year
the
was-
best game in the series. Burnout 3 Takedown, which is
Yo.
a super zany, over-the-top fun racing game. And
And
Silent
04,
Hill 4, The
they
Room, the last
eating.
game to be made by the original.
I recorded a whole video, and it did not record. I'm mad. I'm gonna have to redo it on stream.
Creators of the series, Team Silent.
tonight, though.
While not
I ain't trying to
brand
get
new
scared.
games, there were quite a few remakes this year, like Metroid Zero Mission, a GBA remake of the first Metroid game on the NES. It took many of the improvements from games like Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion and added them into the original game, as well as some brand new stuff to spice things up. There was also a new duo of Pokemon games, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, which came bundled with the aforementioned GBA wireless adapter.
You're telling me Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald came out all in this year? 3 high quality games. Even though I say two. I'm bugging out. Fire Red Leaf, you know, basically the same.
Games
game.
are remakes of
Emerald is really the
first
same game
generation
too.
of
But
Pokemon games
hey,
on the
three
Game Boy.
re.
I remember as a kid, I tried to play Pokemon Blue, and I just couldn't get into it. The game just visually was not very interesting due to the limited colors and primitive sprites. A lot of the locations.
I feel it, but
I'm
I'm a real fan. I ain't gonna lie. I played the OG Pokemon Blue. I was a real.
And I didn't like how the Pokemon didn't have unique sprites in the menu.
I didn't either, but I finished it.
But when I played Pokemon Fire Red, I had a great time. My first experience with Pokemon was watching the 1998 anime, so getting to catch all of my favorite Pokemon from the show in full color with updated sprites, mechanics, and features was amazing. The PS1 classic Metal Gear Solid got a remake on the GameCube this year with Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, featuring greatly improved graphics, re-recorded dialogue, new cutscenes to flesh out the story,
some of these games
and new
we might have
mechanics
to
added
play
to the
on
game
the
from the
stream.
previously released Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. There was also Super Mario 64 DS, a remake of the classic N64 game Super Mario 64. This was my first experience with Mario 64.
Mine is
and
too.
while I don't go back to this one as much as the original because of the small screen and lack of analog controls, it still is pretty cool since you can play as different characters other than Mario who each have their own special moves and abilities. Speaking of remakes, I should also mention some re-releases.
The movement
of
is
old
definitely
games,
weird. I
notably
remember.
Nintendo's
That's the biggest
NES
problem.
series, which was a series of re-releases of old NES games on the GBA. Of course, you had the ones everyone expects like Super Mario Bros., Zelda 1, and Metroid, but there were some pretty cool third-party releases like Castlevania, Bomberman.
All this really is instead of having online services to upload the games, especially like this, just a remake. All this now we'll get a classic series. You just up like a new game in the store. Boom. I feel like maybe it's because it's so accessible. I don't know, but this is all this is. Honestly, it's just a remake of older games. This is how now we get remakes of older games.
Okay, so we've talked about new games in old series,
like old games.
New games based on old intellectual properties, like licensed games. This year saw a number of great licensed games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 refined the gameplay of the previous entries in the series, adding in several new characters, mechanics, and balance changes to.
I'm not gonna lie, this year is amazing.
There was also Star Wars Battlefront, a Star Wars first
Battlefront. Oh my, they were eating, bro.
They
were eating.
The SpongeBob movie game is an.
I heard this game was hard, but I could not get into SpongeBob like that. Game wise,
that gave us the
movie shows, I love
Battle
it.
for Bikini Bottom the previous year. The SpongeBob movie game has some
platform
challenges and fun level design that shouldn't be overlooked. And of course, this year also gave us another awesome movie tie-in game, Spider-Man 2, one of the grails of licensed games.
I heard it was hard.
Great web-slinging mechanic that actually requires a bit of skill to use. Its inclusion of new material that wasn't in the movie to flesh out the game's story a bit more, and its open world, which was fairly impressive for its time. But that's enough about old games from existing franchises. Let's talk about the brand new series that started this year.
Don't know who this thing is.
Let's show Xbox some love and start with Fable. Xbox as a console
my OG Ron would be
well known for RPGs, but Fable was at one point one of their mainstay franchises. Probably
geeking right now. He would be geeking.
Was its ability to choose between being a hero or a villain. Obviously nowadays such a binary alignment system is pretty unremarkable, but back in the day this was pretty cool. And being able to see how your actions affect the world around you, how other people treat you, and how your character looks is pretty awesome. Another big game that came out this year was Far Cry. This game plays quite a bit differently from the much more open-ended later games in the franchise, but it still has the fish out of water in a foreign country FPS gameplay that the series is known for. This year also gave us Killzone, the Sony exclusive series that everyone forgot. This series seemed like PlayStation's answer to Xbox's Halo, considering they were both futuristic military first-person shooters.
Halo, no. Maybe I guess you could say that because of when they came out, but I feel like Killzone was its own thing, something forgotten for sure. But I don't think it was a Halo. I think they're just trying to make a shooter.
The shooter that came out this year was Red Dead Revolver, the first game in the popular Red Dead series. But instead of being an open world game, it's a more straightforward third-person shooter. This year also had the zany and surreal Katamari Damacy, where you go around rolling everything you can find, including buildings, animals, and human beings into a ball. You can't forget everyone's favorite multiplayer monster slaying game franchise that started this year, Monster Hunter, which was one of the PS2 games that had online play. And last but not least, I can't not mention that this year saw the release of the most popular MMORPG of all time, World of Warcraft. If we look past all of the games from big-name established developers like Capcom and Rockstar, we'll also find that this year had a number of some of the first popular indie games, like the surreal dream adventure game Yume Nikki, the Metroidvania staple Cave Story, and the PS2 and GameCube updated version of the Flash game Alien Hominid. I think it's important to talk about how much of a big deal this release was. This was a Newgrounds online Flash game that got an official release on 2 of the big 3 home video game consoles. This was certainly a big step for the future of indie games. Of course, I didn't mention everything that happened this year, and I didn't talk about every game that came out in 2004. I didn't bring up The Sims 2, a sequel to the Sims 2 Sims game that helped popularize the life sim genre. I didn't mention Def Jam Fight for New York, a fighting game with a roster of real-life musical artists who were signed to the Def Jam record label as characters, like Ludacris, Ice-T.
I'm bugging by saying PSP possibly, bro. I'm bugging. PS2
and Snoop Dogg.
Bro,
I neglected to speak on Kirby.
If we had in an alternate universe, I don't know how that would work, but we would have PS5 graphics with a PS2 era. Like graphically wise, it would be amazing. I guess that's what it was at the time. Really let me stop.
Since it was a multiplayer Metroidvania Kirby game. I haven't touched on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, a unique action platformer that made use of these weird controller drums called the DK Bongos controller. And I didn't even comment on one of my personal favorite games WarioWare Touched, which made great use of the DS's features in its zany microgames. So hey, please feel free to let me know in the comments what I didn't mention in this video. Sometimes I decide not to talk about certain topics because they'd ruin the flow of the video. Sometimes I honestly just forget stuff. And sometimes there's really cool stuff that I did not know about at all. 2004 really was a phenomenal year for gaming. So many cool games, consoles, and events in gaming. And it was really fun to go back and remember how the gaming landscape was back then. Thanks for watching, y'all, and have a great rest of your day.
I appreciate it, Brody.